Welcome, Sue. It is an absolute privilege to have you as our guest today. When I started preparing for this interview, I realised there are so many questions I wanted to ask you, but we would need in excess of 4 hours to cover just your incredible career. I was fortunate enough to meet Sue over 20 years ago while we were working together raising funds for juvenile diabetes and the Walk for the Cure. And I've followed your career and have always had the utmost respect for you. So welcome, Sue, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me here, thank you. Actually, that Walk for the Cure started in 1984.
Wow.
Yes, and we had it in Victoria and New South Wales. So it's been going a long time. It was very difficult to get that one over the line, I can assure you.
Well, I very much enjoyed our time together, and it was a great cause, and to see people out and about walking around Albert Park Lake was just magic.
Well, it's raised over $40 million, which was it's been a great initiative, so I'm really proud of that. And thank you for being involved, Tamara.
So in 1971, with your late husband Angelo, you built Dan Sue Constructions, where you completed some pretty substantial property developments. I also know that you were the first ever female licensed builder in 1995. What did you have to do back then to become a female builder?
Well, it goes back even further, Tamara. I mean, officially maybe 1971, but I think it would have been about 1967 when we first started out as developers. It originally started when Angelo had a horrific accident on a site. He was a tradie and a stick went through his eye. And being the man that he was, such a professional, and so everything had to be just perfect, we decided we'd get into building. So I always had an interest in building. I'd never been a builder, of course. It was just something you never did back in those days. Women usually got married and had children and stayed home back in my time. And so I was in a man's world for a long time, a heck of a long time. I didn't know any other world, I didn't know any other life. I knew only that I was involved with men. So it didn't concern me whatsoever. But what I will say is I never changed who I was. I never became one of the blokes or one of the boys. I was always a woman, and I gave respect and I expected it in return. That's the person that I am. So it was quite an interesting beginning into the building industry, but I was always fascinated by design and construction. And Angelo, where he came from in Italy, they weren't trained in just one particular area. It was in all fields, all trades. So he was pretty talented, and as far as drawings were concerned, he could do that as well. So I was always over his shoulder watching everything that he did because I had a thirst for knowledge. I wanted to learn about it. I was very interested in it.
Well, that actually leads me into my next question of all about being in the building industry back in those days. Were you able to affect change in this male-dominated industry?
Well, there was no change to be had because I was the only woman at that particular time. And because I was so busy doing what I was doing and working 7 days a week, we had other businesses besides the building and construction side of things. I mean, we had 400 staff and I was working 7 days a week. So I really didn't think about that at the time. I thought, oh, this is just normal. I'm just doing what you do when you've got a business, not thinking about women not being involved. However, what I did notice at the time was that there were no women tradies, no apprentices coming through, which I thought was really odd, but I didn't do much about it because I was too busy. I was already working about 18 hours a day, so that was really far from my thoughts, thinking about women being involved. But I always used to think about, well, why aren't women involved in the trades? But that was at the back of my mind. I didn't know anything about it.
And I dare say that being on a building site back then was a lot different to now.
Oh.
Back then, I don't know that they had their high-vis vests and those hard hats and closed shoes. So that was actually probably not a very glamorous look back then.
Oh, I still turned up in high heels and stockings, and I do recall the guys when I get into the sheds and they pulled down all the girly stuff because they were showing me respect. And of course they'd clean down the table and clean down the chair, and you know, it was all very different back in those days, very, very different.
But it is interesting to see nowadays how many females are working at road construction. As you drive through streets of Melbourne, I'd say there's a very high percentage of more female than men.
But they shouldn't just be holding up the stop-start sign. We've got more women. I mean, it's really interesting to note that in the past 25 years, women in trades has not changed, not the numbers. Only 2% of all trades in this country are women. Now that hasn't changed in 25 years. And I'm very, very much involved now with women in trades and getting more and more women to take on a trade.
In property, we always talk about location, location, location. What has been your criteria when you look for sites?
Well, that's very true, but I know it might sound a little odd, but always look for a corner position, the corner. In our very, very early days, of the purchase of our first home back in 1966 was on an estate where there were two houses, ours, the builder had gone bust, and the house opposite, which was a farmhouse. And Angelo and I always wanted to get a house facing north. It was in Scoresby. So we've always looked for the high side of the road, facing north if possible, but of course with the industrial estates that was very, very different. It was always about the price and location and infrastructure and freeways and all that sort of thing. But in our very, very early days, in our first home, which was a big venture for us, was facing north. It was the only house on the estate facing north, so that was perfect.
They always say there are only so many corners available. So one of your many mantras you have, and this is the one that absolutely resonates with me, you never take no for an answer. You've encountered a lot of challenges and you've come back fighting every time. I just love the positivity. I love that that's what you live by, that not taking no for an answer.
Well, in a man's world, and if you're a female and trying to break into that, to their business or to that world, it's not easy. But I find men really quite easy to deal with, to be quite honest. They can be really soft, It's just how you handle them.
Absolutely.
I find men great to work with. I mean, that's the only life I ever knew for 40 years was working with men. And I remember with when I went to see the AFL about women's football, I was more or less told to go home and start some knitting. And I'm a person that if I believe in something and I think it's the right thing, whether it be purchasing something, whether it be real estate or whatever, and I think it's the right thing to do, I don't take no for an answer because I've got enough confidence in myself to know that, yeah, look, you can make mistakes. Goodness me, if you don't make a few mistakes, there's something wrong with you. But I've got enough confidence in myself to know that, yes, I've made the right decision. So, yes, I don't take no for an answer.
I love that.
I just keep on moving. I mean, there's too much negativity. What if? Well, what if? What if we didn't buy that land in Hallam 40 years ago? We were told it was Fred Flintstone territory. Cost us, what, $300,000? Well, you can see what it's worth now. You've got to believe in your own judgment. And I mean, if you listen to all the so-called experts, valuers, for example, they value on what, nothing against valuers, we absolutely need them, but they do a lot of statistics and analysis, whereas when you've been in the business a while, you've got that gut feeling that you know that this is the right thing to do. And yes, I've had failures, but they've been in businesses that I didn't have enough knowledge about. So the moral of the story is I've stuck with what I know.
Fantastic. I know one of my little mantras is I never want to die wondering. Yeah. When I'm busy talking to clients and they're umming and ahhing about a purchase of a property or leasing of a property, and I look back and again of some of your other great ones is do your homework, have a go, know the market, talk to as many people, and I think all of that ties in so well with what we live by every day in our...
In everything that we do in our lives. I think I like to be informed. I just don't go off and just do things. I do my homework. I'm very serious about that. But at the end of the day, the decision rests with me. And if I fail, I can only blame myself.
Well, clearly you haven't had too many failures.
Yeah, thank you.
Which again leads to my other question about you're one of the most preeminent philanthropists and the money you have raised is extraordinary. What are the causes that have always resonated with you?
It's a funny thing, I did an analysis not that long ago as to about how much money, and I'm trying to be boastful here, the sort of money that I've raised and over the years that I've been involved in philanthropy when I was able to do it, it's over 200 million plus. So when I think back, my first donation was $8 and I'm just come from a simple housing commission home, barely had enough to live on. And I've been able to do that in the last 40 odd years and put it back into the Australian community and make a difference in all sorts of areas of, whether it be mainly research actually, mainly medical research. And I'm incredibly proud that I've made such inroads into helping find cures because medical science is very, very slow. It just doesn't happen overnight. I mean, like to develop a drug, for instance, can take up to 10 years to develop a drug, and then at the end of the day, after 10 years, it may not be any good. So you've got to have a lot of patience, determination, and know who's doing what, and I do a lot of research on the researchers.
And where do you find the time for all of these projects? It's extraordinary.
You find time for anything you believe in. You find time for good causes. I do my research. I've got a lot of people out there that I know in the medical research world. I do my own behind the scenes, and I support people that are really truly making an impact now. And also in the future, but now that I can see some results during my lifetime, rather than leaving it for someone else to make that decision.
So in 2017, the Footy Lady was released and you were named Melburnian of the Year. I know you were quite the footballer back in the day, and your father was an umpire. Tell me about your love for the doggies and your involvement with the Women's Football League.
Oh, it goes back a long time, but I remember when I barracked for the Western Bulldogs, or Footscray as it was known then. I used to go to the Whitten Oval, Western Oval, every fortnight with my brother to watch the game, and I loved footy. I was good at sport, and my brother will tell you this, I was better than him at football, although he turned out a very good umpire, and as did my father. Dad, being a policeman, the only other job he could do, like really without getting permission, was to be able to be an umpire. Because back in those days, the Chief Commissioner had to give you permission to do another job. And it was also help with money coming into the household. Richard, of course, that was a different story, that was pocket money. But when I used to go to the Whitten Oval, I would always be rushing onto the ground to kick, because I could show my brother a thing or two, as you do with your brother. He was 15 months older than me, and he thought he was pretty cool and a pretty good footballer. And he did play footy, he played for his school. And I always wanted to play serious football. And my cheer squad decided to form a footy team to play against the other cheer squads, men and women against. And I decided I'd join that. And we used to train during the week, and it was a long way from home. I had to get the train. Of course, we didn't have a car till I was about 13. So I became very independent at a very early age, catching a train, and with my brother, only unless my brother came with me to look after me, although I did disappear once I got there. I didn't stay always with Richard. Oh, gee, what do you want to do that for? You don't meet boys that way. But anyhow, we used to play on a Sunday because there was no footy then. And I got to a stage where I was being knocked around far too much physically, and I gave as good as I got. I was very tough. I was a very tough footballer, not the fastest runner. And I remember saying to Dad, look, Dad, can you teach me how to tackle properly? Because Dad was a very good sportsman himself. And he said, I'll teach you the policeman's tackle. That's what he called it. Not that it was the policeman's tackle. Well, I learned to tackle. I was one of the best tacklers in the league, in our division, in our cheer squad. And just tell you a little story. I was a very good tackler. I wasn't the fastest runner. So this particular day, I was at the Whitten Oval going to a board meeting. You're never late for a board meeting for the president. And a lady stopped me out in the corridor, and she said, I remember you. And I thought, I don't remember you. She's probably in her 70s. I remember you, she said. You tackled me so hard, you broke both my arms. I think she must have had brittle bones. The last time I saw her, she was in the back of an ambulance. Hope I never see her again. But anyhow, Dad taught me to tackle. So anyhow, I was giving as I got. But when you're playing with boys who are 15, 16, 17, they're men and they're strong. We're not built the same as men, I acknowledge that. And Dad made me stop and made me retire. And I never let him get over that. I sooked for 2 weeks, and I always wanted to play, but it never left me playing footy. Yes, I did go and learn to crochet and knit, but at the same time I did...
I'm hoping you were crocheting and knitting Bulldogs jumpers.
Oh, I got so many scarves, it's ridiculous. But anyhow, I still kept playing footy in the backyard, down at the park. Didn't cost my parents anything because we couldn't afford extras with sporting activities. It had to be free or not at all. But it never left me. And when you're 15, I didn't have any resources or contacts or money or anything. And I constantly watched the evolution of women in footy because I thought it was so unfair that women were not given the same opportunities. And if you know anything about women's football, it goes back further than 1913 when the men went to war, and in Western Australia the women played in the men's positions when the men went to war. So there's been this pent-up frustration about women wanting to play footy for a long time. In fact, it goes back even further. There's a history book written on it by Rob Hess from Victoria University. It goes back further than 1913. So anyhow, I was invited to a luncheon to go and speak about my life's journey and in a man's world and sport and everything. I spoke to members of the board of this particular club who were one of the main players with women's football, and they told me they were on their knees ready to close. And I thought, this is crazy. I've been able to make an impact in medical research and managed to get government to fund dollar for dollar in many, many areas of medical research, but this is so wrong. Why should women be treated this way and not have the infrastructure that men have? And again, I don't want to be superior to men. I just wanted to be treated as an equal, and I wanted them to be treated as an equal. So I wrote out a cheque, a substantial cheque, so they could then get a full-time employee. And I did it for a number of years, which meant it really put them on the path to becoming much more serious about football. Then I went to the AFL, and there were others, not just me involved, there were others. But I guess I was the catalyst to making it really happen. And I went to see the previous CEO to Gill, and he got stuck into me because I suggested he wasn't supporting women. And I won't go into too much detail there, I'd rather keep that one confidential, and he was not interested. So I thought, okay, I don't take no for an answer. I thought there's got to be another way around this. I've got to be able to, this is ridiculous. I've been to seen facilities as you wouldn't put your dog in. I mean, I've seen women, 22 women with one toilet, one urinal and no doors on their toilet in a shed that they used to store stuff. That was where they used to take all their gear, and it was crazy. It was disgusting what I saw, some of the infrastructure. So I made an appointment to go and see Gil McLaughlin. It was 3 days before Christmas, and I thought, here I go. I had a good plan when I went in to see him. I'd done my research. I knew who was doing what. And I said, Gil, I want to launch women's football. I won't go into too much detail now. And I said, I want to have a breakfast and launch it. Will you be my guest speaker? And I thought he'll say, no, I'm too busy. Yes, when is it? Well, that was the first shock. I thought, he's for real. Because this is in the early days. This is when the board were not considering, the commission were not considering women's football. And he said, what else do you need? I thought, God, media, this and that. He said, yes, they'll work with you. This was 3 days before Christmas, and I shook his hand. And the Italian way is when you shake a person's hand, even though I'm not Italian, but I'm very familiar with the Italian way as we did business. You didn't need reams of paper. You shook a person's hand, and that was the deal done. He shook my hand, and I thought, I hope you are the real deal, Gil. You really are. Well, he did everything he promised. Now, you can either love or hate Gil McLaughlin, but he is the man that went out, really stuck his neck out to bring women's football to fruition. The Commission didn't want to have it in 2017. They wanted it to 2020. Look what would have happened if we had waited till 2020. He came along and saw the matches at the Marvel Stadium. He was convinced this was the way to go. And he's a businessman. Bottom line, membership. And it was interesting at the time, the memberships of clubs that had female teams, their membership was going up because this had really, truly become a family event. So when you look back now and you see that women are now taken very seriously in AFLW, we now have 600,000 young women playing our great game right around the country, plus. And when I go to places now, and I follow all the teams because I'm interested in women playing sport, full stop. Little girls come up to me, and that's why my book is called The Footy Lady. Oh, you're the footy lady. Oh, you're the lady that made all this happen. Thank you. And I have parents that come and thank me. That's all I need. I know that I've done something good, given women an opportunity, but for me it's gone further than that now. It's about women in sport, full stop. And I'm heavily involved in Women in Sport at Victoria University. The chair is named after me. I don't care what sport a woman plays, so long as she's participating, given the opportunities and treated fairly, whether it be wage parity, whatever. So long as we're given the same opportunities as men, not to be superior, like it was in my building days. It was just to be treated as an equal. Well, I didn't know any other life except with men, and I found them fantastic to work with.
Okay, it's now 2021. How can we as women in leadership keep building a platform for other women? I note your admiration for Mary Tyler Moore and her leadership, and she broke so many barriers for women. I love that show. Talk to me about where we are today.
Well, Mary I did know for quite some time. Mary had a heart of gold. She was a very wealthy woman, self-made, and I admired her enormously for what she was able to achieve in her lifetime, even though she struggled terribly with type 1 diabetes and did die as a result of the complications. But to me, what's so important about in the development and supporting women is belief. Belief in yourself, belief that you can do it. And we need to instill in our girls, our little girls at school, coming through, that they can do it. Anything's achievable if you set your mind to it. The one thing that I used to say to my own daughter when she was alive, hard work, Danielle. You must work hard, believe in yourself. Yes, don't take no for an answer, but also we need to ensure that, like for example in football, when we've got all the teams playing the game, that they're remunerated accordingly, just like their male counterparts. I don't expect that now because we're not playing a full season and we don't have all the teams there, but remuneration, pathways, providing pathways, women wanting to have children. I'm connected with a medical institute, and the women came to me and said to me, 60% of medical researchers in this country are women, 60%. But we're not providing pathways for these bright women to be able to work in the laboratories, come up with the cures that we're all so desperate for, if they want to have children. So I developed something, and call it a bursary or a grant, whatever you want to call it, that the women can now go and have their children. We have a childcare facility at the Institute. They bring in a research assistant to keep their job, because with research you just can't walk away from it. They keep the work going, so then when they're ready to come back, they slot back into their job. So what's really important is we provide, and we speak out about it to our young women coming through, one, that anything's achievable, to believe in themselves, but also at the same time to believe that it's not just about a tertiary education. It's not the be-all, end-all if you don't have a tertiary education. I didn't have one. I was never encouraged back in the 60s. My brother was. I wanted to be an entrepreneur at 6. But to encourage our children from maybe from secondary level that they may want to be involved in a trade, because we are desperate for tradespeople in this country. We've got a building boom going on. I don't see it getting any less in the foreseeable future. So provide the pathways, encourage young women. There's so many ways that they can be successful, and nurture them at school. That's what I see is very, very important. But at the end of the day, it's not going to come to you. You've got to work at it. But believe in what you can do and what's achievable, and aim for the stars. I've always aimed for the stars, and I've been knocked back a few times, but I've got up and I've kept going. And what I think is really important to young women, and men too, that you look after your health. Because we've got a country and a population now that's morbidly obese, desperately need to do something about children playing more sport. When I went to school, sport was compulsory. I don't think it's compulsory anymore. Got children sitting on their backsides, not playing sport. Too much is electronic stuff. They're glued to it. Unfortunately, in these last couple of years, it's been tough. But we've just got to get them off their backsides, get them out playing sport, and make it possible for them to play sport, because not everybody can afford to go and join various clubs. Just make it possible for them. So starting off young, educating them young, getting the counsellors coming in at school, giving them all sorts of options, not just about STEM, which is very important, or law or whatever. There are trades out there. We are crying out for trades. You know, we're just desperate for tradespeople. And there are so many opportunities, but also we need to provide more teachers at TAFE for these young women coming through. I mean, when I went to get my builder's licence, I was the only woman in the class. But again, what I say about men, they knew I was struggling. I was very good in the back office. I'd run the finances for years. It was easy for me. But when it came to trades, I mean, when I had to actually physically go and do something, I said to the men, I need help. And when I was in the workshop, those men were remarkable. I've become friends with so many of them that first day of my class, I went home and thought, well, let's put into practice what I've learned. So I took off a fire-rated door in our garage. Once you take it off, you've got to put it back on because the alarm wouldn't have worked. So I was so proud, but you know what? There was those men that helped me. So working together, we need the men as much as the men need the women. We just got to try and work together. I have found that has worked for me, and showing them respect, they show me respect, and I never want to be superior to them, I just want to work with them. So providing pathways for our young women and belief.
Love that. Rob, I think you'll agree with me. What a great interview, Sue. Thank you so much. So lovely to catch up with you after our 20-year hiatus, and what you're doing around is just incredible. So thank you, Sue.
Thank you for having me here. Thanks. Yeah.